folks, it really does not happen where I get to cover somebody who I've actually met. It's very rare that I cover someone who's been in this studio that I've sat right across the board from for a few hours. But here we are. Here we are, right here in the great state of Indiana, the Hoosier state. Last week, our lieutenant governor and Christian nationalist pastor Micah Beckwith appeared on the Flashpoint program where he admitted that he's doing his best to give the residents of Indiana, this state, permission to hate the religion of Islam. That's right. He wants to teach people how to hate 1.5 billion people's religion. On the show, the fellow Christian nationalist pastor Brian Gibson declared that Islam is incompatible with a constitutional republic that is built on the word of God and must be banned. Our lieutenant governor agreed with him and said that the right-wing effort to ban Sharia law is vital to saving this nation by giving the people permission to hate again. So I'm not gonna waste too much time. I'm gonna let you hear what the man had to say for himself.
Yeah, and Pastor Brian, you touched on something really important there. This idea that all ideas are the same. Lieutenant Governor, that's really the moral relativism that came to us out of the 60s, and then it became the classroom. So if every value system, every political system, every religion is the same, everything's equal, then what made America great in the first place? It really gets rid of what made us great, and it makes it very difficult to talk about. Some things aren't good for our society. Child marriage is not good for our society. A religion that wants to make everyone else bow down to them is not good for our society. As you've been traveling across the state, and you mentioned this earlier that you're already talking about assimilation, have you noticed a shift at all in the response? In other words, initially people kind of bristle at that and they're like, oh no, we're supposed to let everybody get everything. Have you noticed a shift that people are now starting to say, no, there's some things we need to stand up against and say, no, we don't want this?
Yeah, absolutely. You're giving people permission to hate again. And I know that sounds a little harsh at first, but we've seen this movement to eradicate hate in our culture. That is the worst thing we could do. The Bible talks about how God hates certain things. And when we say we want to eradicate hate, think about this. We're actually saying we want to eradicate a characteristic of God. And hate is not the opposite of love. Indifference is the opposite of love. And so when I talk about this, I say, guys, we need to, in Indiana, we need to hate certain things. If radical jihadi mindset starts coming into our state, I'm going to hate it, and I'm going to hate it with everything that I am. And I'm going to call on others to hate it because I hate Islam. It's a demonic death call. Now, I love Muslims because they make great Christians when Jesus gets a hold of them, but I hate Islam. And we need to be okay with hating again. And so, again, this has been a twofold battle. The jihadis can't come in until the first thing is torn down. Well, who tears it down? It's the useful idiots known as the Marxists. Right? This is the Red-Green Alliance playing over and over again throughout history. You can go all the way back to Medina when Muhammad was in Medina. He did the same thing to the 1970s when the Marxists teamed up with the IRG, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard, and they did the same thing. And you know what happens? Once it's torn down, the Islamists come in, they build their caliphate, and then what do? They actually get rid of the Marxists and they lead them out into the public execution streets and they destroy them. That's what's happening again. History playing out over again. And so we need to see it. We need to be proactive, be active. Now's the time to do it. But hate evil and love what God loves.
Amen. That is the lieutenant governor of the state of Indiana. Now, I'm a little bit even more, I ain't going to use the word I want to use because you can't say that on the radio, but I'm a little bit more teed off, right? Because Micah Beckwith was on this show. I mean, not on this show. On the show that I work on, John Allen's show, a few years ago. I think this was 2 years ago. Maybe it might have been last year, a year or two ago. Now, John talks about this very often. He's a Muslim. He's a Muslim. There's times I come in here and he's praying. And not just him. right down here in downtown Gary, right? Right across the street from where I am right now at the beautiful WLTH studios. There's a building right there on 5th Avenue called the Mecca Building. When I first came to Gary in the early 90s as a small child, one of the first places that I was able to go to be educated, to be empowered, was the Mecca Building, run by Mr. Rashid and Mr. Bilal, right there at the Mecca Building. I learned more about Black History Month, about the history of civil rights, right there. And not just me. A lot of my friends and people that were my age and I grew up with as well. And I wasn't a Muslim. I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. My parents are Christians. I never got any hate from them. I don't get hate from John Allen. What is this man talking about? What are any of these people talking about? Like, seriously. But this is the issue that we have. This is why I was talking about last week that MAGA is descending into a death cult. When even somebody like Thomas Massey, who votes with Donald Trump over 90% of the time, is considered not MAGA enough. They are descending into everything. Again, I am no fan of the liberals. Okay, Lord knows if you listen to this show that you know that I'm a leftist. I am no fan of liberalism or liberals in that sense. But they were certainly right about Donald Trump and MAGA about a lot of the things. When they said it was a cult, a death cult, they had it on the money right there. And the problem is that there was always a lot of especially in the early days of Trump, there was a lot of discourse within MAGA. There were different sides, different ideological worldviews within MAGA about what MAGA meant. MAGA means America first. It means small government. Does it mean ending wars? Donald Trump said he was against expanding the war industrial complex. A big part of the reason that a lot of people, even some people on the left, voted for and supported Donald Trump was because he said he was against wars. He wasn't going to expand the military industrial complex anymore. He wasn't going to expand wars anymore. He was critical of Barack Obama. He said Barack Obama was going to start a war with Iran. And he said Kamala Harris was going to start a war with Iran. He said Hillary Clinton was going to start a war with Iran. Those were some of the things that he used to get elected. And then as soon as he gets elected for the second time, what does he do? He starts a war with Iran. The same thing that he said that Barack Obama, that Joe Biden, that Hillary Clinton, that Kamala Harris would do, he's doing himself. He is doing this himself. And now what we're seeing is the sane elements of MAGA. The Thomas Masseys, the Marjorie Taylor Greens, people who had a specific ideological worldview about lower taxation or smaller government or, maybe some socially conservative views about abortion and LGBT stuff. But maybe they were also anti-war. Like, that element of MAGA is gone now. It has descended into the crazies. The wackos like this. Now, you are the lieutenant governor of a state, a great state, the state of Indiana. Guess who pays taxes? Muslims pay taxes. There are Muslims all over the city of Gary. I just told you. I was here with one last night. Right in the studio. I've been around Muslims the whole time I've been here in the city of Gary, Indiana. The idea that you would have a lieutenant governor, somebody whose job it is to represent the state of Indiana, who literally has that type of bigoted view about the citizens of his state who pay taxes, who own homes, who start businesses, who hire other Hoosiers. is despicable. And this should be a much bigger issue than it is. I'm very surprised that I'm the first person to talk about this. I thought other shows would be talking about this on WLTH and other. I thought it would be on Channel 2, Channel 7, Channel 5, Channel 9. I thought I'd see this everywhere. I thought it'd be on CNN. I thought it'd be on MSNBC. I thought it'd be all over the place. But the problem is that MAGA has descended into such madness that this really doesn't make too much of a blip on the radar. So let's just look at some of what he's saying, right? You know, Micah Beckwith is obviously a Republican, a pastor. He's a self-described Christian nationalist. He became lieutenant governor last January, alongside Governor Mike Braun. Before he was in politics, he was just known as a conservative activist pastor in Noblesville, Indiana, where he led Life Church and hosted a podcast. Obviously, he's a part of the MAGA wing of the Republican Party. He is a Christian nationalist. Now, Christian nationalists believe that this country, the United States, was founded as a Christian nation. That is just blatantly, patently false. Legally and constitutionally, the United States of America was not founded as a Christian nation. The United States Constitution never mentions Christianity or God, and explicitly prohibits any religious text for public office. It established a secular government prioritizing religious freedoms. The freedom to be religious is not the same thing as saying that you have to be a Christian to be able to rule or govern in the United States of America. People like Thomas Jefferson were deists. Of course, he supports the death penalty, but Jesus didn't support the death penalty. He never explicitly endorsed the death penalty. But if you look at his teachings, he does constantly emphasize radical mercy. Mercy for people who are sinners. That is why we are Christians, because we believe you can be forgiven for your sins. He believed in mercy, forgiveness, and the avoidance of retributive violence. One of my favorite New Testament excerpts is about the adulterous woman in John 8, 3 through 11. Religious leaders bring a woman to Jesus who is subject to the death penalty under Mosaic law. Jesus actually stopped her execution by telling the crowd, "Let any of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at this woman." And guess what? They all had to fall back because they like, hey, whoo boy, I've been sinning. He showed her grace. He said, "Neither do I condemn you. Now go and leave your life of sin." That was the thing. You're supposed to give them the opportunity to leave their life of sin. That is how Jesus handled. In the Sermon of the Mount, Matthew 5, Jesus challenges the ancient legal principle of an eye for an eye, which is retributive justice, commanding his followers to not to resist an evil person and to turn the other cheek. Even Jesus himself was the victim of the death penalty. While being crucified, he didn't wish death on the people who were literally killing him. In Luke, he says, "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they are doing." That's the Jesus I believe in. That is why I wear this cross every day. He repeatedly argued that Mr. Beckwith here, Lieutenant Governor Beckwith, repeatedly argued that the phrase separation of church and state has been misused and has said Christian values should play a larger role in the government. Critics argue those views blur constitutional boundaries between religion and government. Obviously, I mean, but this isn't the first time. And I hate this because, again, I met the man. I shook his hand. He was a very nice man. This is why I'm a little bit surprised and I'm taken aback by what he said exactly. I'm very taken aback by the fact that he would say this about our Muslim brothers and sisters while being the lieutenant governor of a state. I mean, look, I'm sure all politicians, mayors, governors, presidents, whoever, have their viewpoints about certain things, certain religions, certain whatever. Usually, they understand that when and obviously I'm speaking of before MAGA, they understand that when they are speaking under the umbrella of being an elected official, that you are not just the mayor, the governor, the senator for Christians. You're the senator, the mayor, the governor for Muslims, for atheists, for agnostics, for everybody else. For everybody else. You're not just the mayor. You're not just the mayor. Eddie Melton is not just mayor of Christian Gary or Muslim Gary or atheist and agnostic Gary. He's the mayor of all of us. He expects tax dollars and tax revenue from all of us. His job is to uphold the law and respect all of us and all of our beliefs and all of our values, unless they're illegal and he's hurting somebody, And speaking of Christian views, right? January 6th, our lieutenant governor implied that the unrest was God's plan and described it as evidence of God's hand at work. So when MAGA people were beating up security guards and police officers with fire extinguishers, beating and choking law enforcement, these people are the same back to blue people, remember? Whenever the police murder a black man or a black woman, the first thing, we back the blue, we back the blue. We love the police. We love the police. The police is the greatest thing in the history of the world. They weren't on January 6th, apparently. Because these people were literally crushing police. You can easily go and find the uncensored footage of what happened on January 6th and see police officers being brutalized, being bludgeoned, being choked. About the Democrats, Lieutenant Governor Beckwith referred to abortion rights supporters as influenced by a Jezebel spirit and described some pro-choice positions as demonic. Even other Republicans, some of them condemn the language as extreme. And then there's, of course, the first time he really got on my radar is the whole constitutional 3/5 compromise, where he talks about the 3/5 compromise that made black people black slaves in the South, 3/5 of a human being legally. He called it a great move because he argued that it ultimately weakened slavery. Every historian, civil rights group, and even many of his own fellow politicians have completely out and out rejected that claim. They argued that the compromise actually strengthened slaveholding states politically, which it did. The compromise allowed slaveholding states to count a portion of their enslaved population who were not people under the law for congressional representation, giving the South outsized political power for decades. So the South actually gained political representation by counting these slaves as 3/5 of a human being. And of course, obviously, it was not about getting rid of or weakening the institution of slavery, because it did not allow black people any legal rights to freedom of voting power. I mean, we go back to this with Charlie Kirk not too long ago. Anytime they are arguing that black people not having rights is the best thing for America or for black people, they are racist. Period. They are racist. They are bigots. Oh, things were better back then because, crime was lower. Okay, if we lived in an authoritarian Chinese state, communist state that y'all claim China is so authoritarian. China's very safe. Does them having lower crime justify mass surveillance? Does it justify not having legal rights? Why is it only black people not having legal rights justify lower crime rates? That's just nonsense. I'm sorry. He's also called art school performances demonic. You know, but for some of the things, hold on, caller. I got to get through the rest of this stuff. Hold on a second. But going back to the original statements, the original video, he brings up child marriage. The host of the show brings up child marriage. Did you know that Michigan Democrats just put up a bill to ban child marriage? And guess who voted against it? 7 Republicans voted against it. Child marriage is legal in every red state but one. And guess which state leads the nation in child marriages per capita? Huh? Guess which one? Just guess. Yeah, here we go. It's West Virginia. It's West Virginia. You would think it'd be Michigan, right? Michigan has all the huge Muslim population in places like Dearborn, Michigan. No, it's West Virginia. Moonshine, whiskey, ass, West Virginia. Moonshine country. That is where all the child marriages. And to show you how bizarre them trying to equate child marriage with Islam. Islam, as if Christianity. Here is actually, you have a Missouri Republican senator named Mike Moon defending child marriage in Congress. Here you go.
I've heard you talk about parents' rights to raise their kids how they want. In fact, I just double-checked. You voted no on making it illegal for kids to be married to adults at the age of 12 if their parents consented to it. You said actually that should be the law because it's the parents' right and the kids' right to decide what's best for them, to be raped by an adult. Okay?
Do you know any kids who have been
With
married
marriage.
at age 12?
That was the law.
do you know
You
any
voted
kids-
not to change it.
Do you know any kids who have been married at age 12?
I don't need to.
I do. And guess what? They're still married.
Gentlemen,
Did you hear this man? He said, "Do you know any kids that were married at age 12?" And the other politician says no, and he says, "I don't need to." And he says, "Well, they're still married." As if that justifies it. As if that justifies it. And they're talking about Muslims and child marriage. Let's not even talk about the transatlantic slave trade. The biggest forced migration in the history of the world. The biggest crime. We just did the story a few months ago. The United Nations called the transatlantic slave trade the greatest crime in American history. Who pulled that off? Anybody? Let's do this again. Who was that? Was that Muslims? Was that the Chinese? Man, the transatlantic slave trade. I don't know. It was supposed Christians. Supposed Christians. I say supposed because they're not real Christians to me. The man Jesus Christ I just quoted, that's not them. Colonialism. Let's talk about colonialism. Who invaded the whole world? Colonized the North America, South America, Africa, Middle East, everywhere. Australia. How in the hell did they get to Australia? Australia's so far out the way. How the hell did they even get there? These are the people who will lecture you about other religions being evil and other cultures being evil. People who are currently Donald Trump and the Republicans, or should I say the Trump administration, just bombed a school in Iran during the first weekend of bombing. They killed 165 schoolgirls. 165 schoolgirls. They tried to blame it on the Iranians until the proof was so overwhelming that it was done by the Trump administration that they just said, ah, yeah, we did it. Is it any wonder that much of the world is rooting for Iran and Russia and China against these types of people? You go to Africa, you go to much of Latin America, you go to even a lot of places in Europe, you go to a lot of places in the rest of the world, they are actively rooting against the United States. They literally call the United States the biggest threat to global peace in the world. Just go find some polls. There's polls all over the place. They'll tell you who they think the greatest threat to world security is. And it ain't Iran. It ain't Iran, everybody. But most importantly, I'm going to tell you what this is about. This is once again about a protected class of people. And that is the Zionists. Notice I didn't say Jews. Not Jews. A lot of my favorite people are Jews. Max Blumenthal, Katie Halper, Jill Stein. Hell, I voted for a Jewish woman 3 times, everybody. I done voted for a Jewish woman 3 times. I didn't say Jews. This is about the Zionists. And the majority of the Zionists in this country are psychotic individuals like this. They're white people, supposed Christian nationalists who believe that, the Jews need to be back in Israel so that, the final battle can happen and Jesus can come and actually send them to a hellfire or something. Some bizarre end times Armageddon belief. Not based on love, not based on forgiveness, not based on that man I just quoted. Let he who is without sin cast the first stone. That's not the guy that ain't the guy I'm talking about. And we see it more. The Zionist, the sort of MAGA Zionist coalition is becoming more and more of an insular cult, a death cult. We just saw that they openly extended massive influence over our primary elections. They've just dethroned Al Green in Texas. They put some young Uncle Tom in his space. Al Green, one of the few people who would stand up against the Trump administration from the Democratic Party with any real guts. They kicked him out of Congress because AIPAC funded his opponent. Thomas Massey, one of the few Republicans willing to stand up against Trump and stand up against the Zionist agenda. They kicked him out. Cori Bush, they funded some Uncle Tom to get her out of Congress, named Wesley Bell, who Jasmine Crockett just endorsed. I told you guys she was a fraud. An AIPAC, Zionist stooge. And the ironic thing is that Islam and Christianity have a hell of a lot more in common than any of us do with Judaism. No, and like I said, I ain't got no problem with Judaism. I got no problem with the Jews. Again, a lot of my favorite activists are Jews. Jesus in the Quran more than Muhammad is. They revere Jesus in the Quran. In Judaism, he's a false prophet. Amongst the Zionists, should I say. And the Zionist, he's a false prophet who is boiling in excrement. But I will say, the one good thing about this is that even a lot of Republicans are starting to see through this. I was very happy to see this. People like Candace Owens and Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson, who have been, again, some of my least favorite people in the world in recent years, but at least they are starting, even a lot of Republicans are starting to wake up to about the Zionist agenda.
You've had an influx of young viewers and some Muslims now that are taking another look at the Tucker Carlson show because you've been somewhat defensive of Islam, just
yes.
online yesterday was a torrent of demands by the Israel Firsters and some regular conservatives. I mean, demanding that I, in their view, return to Muslim hate. You know, you're just out there for clicks. It's like nothing I've done is for clicks.
Yep.
And I have been blown away by how openly the Israel First crowd is demanding that I and others hate Muslims.
The Christian worldview, and by the way, also the Muslim worldview, is a universal worldview. Anybody can come to this faith. And I knew that I would be attacked as like a Muslim lover.
Like, you are not allowed to be opposed to this war or to be in any way soft on.
Yeah, you're not allowed to be soft on Muslims. This is what I'm saying. This is what I was talking about last week, how dangerous it is beginning. People like Megyn Kelly and Tucker Carlson have been the vanguard of the right wing for many years. And even they are not seen as hateful enough for MAGA at this point. MAGA is descending into madness, into chaos. Even people who are their friends, they are now purging them. Tucker Carlson's been purged. Megyn Kelly's been purged. Thomas Massey's been purged. Marjorie Taylor Greene stepped down from Congress because the writing was on the wall. AIPAC was coming for her. The Zionists were coming for her. This is the madness. We're in this is the time of monsters. You know, the old world is dying and the new world is being born. And so we don't know what's going to happen. Let me get this caller. Caller, you've been online for a long time. Thank you so much for waiting.
Well, howdy.
Hey, what's up, Vic?
Well, yeah, I almost forgot 5 times what it was, but no. Hey, I jumped back on. I got my milk out there, you know. Hey, the religious right, I mean the religious conservative, they're going to mess up religion for themselves.
Yep.
Because, I mean, it is so bigoted, it's frightening.
Yeah.
And even when it's not, you can't say anything without hurting their feelings. And I'm sorry, it's not about hurting feelings. It's about understanding when the sun comes up, the light comes out. And if you want to think about the how could I say, the evidence of the Christian movement in this part of the world, you have to go to what's called the Doctrine of Discovery of 1493. That was the one where essentially it made all the conquests, all the animals on the land, possessions in chattel slavery.
Yeah.
And so that's everywhere they went. The human beings became cattle by the church's rule. That's kind of the same one we're talking about right now. And then if you want to think about this particular experience, you go to like the Bacon Revolt, where the European and African slaves revolted together with Bacon, and they wound up burning Jamestown down in 1676, 1674 or 5, and by the time 1680 comes around, there is legislation that specifically uses the term white person. Never before, only after that. And so it comes along with the whole religious movement that's justifying these laws. And so, well, not many toes, don't really want to step on toes, but, if everywhere, if you look, Africa was probably the biggest crime in humanity once they did that. Because it meant everybody was cattle except for their friends. And they didn't have any. So, I mean, how much more sinister could that be? And so we have now projected their sort of divine authority onto their new police state.
Right. Absolutely.
Well, thanks, guys. Thanks a lot, man.
It's all good. I always look forward to your calls.
Bless up, everybody.
All right, now. Thank you for your call, brother. Yeah, he's right. This goes back many years, many years. They are definitely screwing up religion for everybody, and particularly Christianity. And those of us who are Christians have to call that out. You can't just be like, oh, well, it's not me. They're not pushing hate towards me. They will. You see what happened to Marjorie Taylor Greene. You saw what happened to Thomas Massey. They eat their own. They eat their own. All right, folks, it is already 6:50. Wow. I did not expect to be talking about that long. When we come back, oh, man, we are going to get into, once again, healthcare. I bring this up over and over again because it's important to understand. I have to drive this home. America is the only first world country where healthcare is solely a for-profit industry for the most part. Every other rich country in the world has some form of universal health coverage, insurance coverage. People do not go bankrupt because they got sick in virtually every other country that is a wealthy country. It rarely happens. All right, folks, when we come back, we're gonna dig deep on that. And who's benefiting from that? Please stay with us.